Defensive Dispels are abilities that remove harmful debuffs on friendly players and NPCs, as opposed to offensive Dispels which remove helpful buffs from enemies. The two main requirements that we're looking at when making this list is how many debuffs the ability dispels, and how many players it can actually work on. And at number 10, we have our first and only appearance of ability from Vanilla and Classic WoW. The Abolish Poison ability is an ability available to all Druid specs at level 26. It costs 45 silver and can be learned from all Druid trainers. In Classic, its description says, attempts to cure one poison effect on the target and one more poison effect every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. What makes this ability unique and why it deserves a spot on this list is because it was the first Dispel ability in the game that could, at least in theory, dispel multiple poison debuffs. In theory, Abolish Poison can dispel 5 poison debuffs, with the first dispel being instant and the next 4 being every 2 seconds in the 8-second duration of the ability's buff. With a range of 30 yards, this ability could also be cast from pretty far away, relatively speaking. It costs 16% of the Druid's mana to cast, which is the same amount as the Cure Poison's ability. However, the Cure Poison only dispels 1 poison debuff and no more, so casting the superior Abolish Poison that can cure multiple debuffs makes more sense. Abolish Poison is also particularly useful against stacking poison debuffs. The ability saw 3 changes during its time in the game. First, in mid-TBC, its range was increased from 30 to 40 yards. Second, when Wrath launched, it was also made so that Abolish Poison could be cast while in Moonkin form. Finally, in 3.1, Secrets of Ulduar, the duration of Abolish Poison was increased to 12 seconds up from 8, but its Dispel tick was now every 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds. Abolish Poison was eventually removed from the game in Cataclysm, when the 2 Druid abilities of Abolish Poison and the Druid's former Remove Curse were combined into a new ability called Remove Corruption. And what a perfect segue, because Remove Corruption is one of the 9 abilities in the number 9 spot. All of these abilities are in the number 9 spot because they both cure not 1, but 2 different types of debuffs. The Druid ability Remove Corruption was added in Cataclysm and remains in the game even today. This ability nullifies corrupted effects on friendly targets, removing all cures and poison effects. Remove Corruption retained the 40-yard range that both its previous components' abilities had. Its mana cost is also reduced to half to 6.5%. So what makes Remove Corruption so great? Well, aside from being essentially a 2-in-1 Dispel ability, it also has a cooldown of only 8 seconds, which is the same for pretty much all Dispels in the game. Remove Corruption became a lot better in Mists of Pandaria when it was made so it removed all curses and poisons on its targets and not just one. Another change that was applied to pretty much all other Dispels at this time. Another ability number 9 is Cleanse Toxins. This Paladin ability was added in Legion and is only available Protection Retribution specializations. This ability is almost identical to Remove Corruption, with the exception being that it removes poison and disease debuffs but not curses. This ability also has a 40-yard range and 8-second cooldown, the same as Remove Corruption. Although the Survival Hunter is a memed upon spec, it has an ability named Mending Bandage, which is a PvP talent that removes all poison and diseases from the target. This ability was added in Legion, and the other component's ability is that it also does a small amount of healing over time. It has a 25-second cooldown and a 15-yard range. Yet another ability that removes 2 debuffs is the Detox ability, only available to Brewmaster and Windwalker monks. This ability was added in Dragonfly expansion and removes all poison and disease effects from the target. Another ability that can remove 2 types of debuffs is the ability Improved Purify. This talent was added in Dragonflight and is only available to the Holy and Discipline specs. The basic Purify ability the priests have only removes magic debuffs. With the Improved Purify talent, it also removes disease effects as well. Confusingly, there is also a spell named Purify for Paladins in WoW from Vanilla to Cataclysm. This ability dispelled poisons and disease effects, but it still shouldn't be confused with the Priest's Purify ability. The final ability which removed 2 debuffs was also added in Dragonflight. The Improved Purify Spirit ability upgrades the Restoration Shaman's basic Purify, which only removes magic debuffs, to an advanced version which removes both magic and curse debuffs. This ability is identical to a talent from MoP that was also called Purify Spirit. Before we move on to number 8, however, we must acknowledge that the Holy Paladin ability Cleanse also removed all poison and disease debuffs in MoP and WoD. Since these are 2 different debuffs with the same spell requirements, the Cleanse ability for MoP and WoD is on equal footing with both Remove Corruption and Cleanse Toxins, even though the Cleanse ability was significantly changed in Legion. So even though both the MoP Purify Spirit and Cleanse ability for MoP and WoD are no longer in the game, we would be remiss to not include these abilities since they also dispel 2 debuffs at the same time. And at number 8, we have the Monk ability, Diffuse Magic. This ability is the first Dispel on this list to be both a defensive and offensive Dispel. Currently in game, this ability's description is reduces magic damage taken to by 60% for 6 seconds, and transfers all current active harmful magical effects back to the original caster if possible. So, in addition to removing harmful magical effects, it also returns them to the sender. To make this ability more strong, from MoP to Legion, the damage reduction was 90%, meaning almost all magic damage could be avoided. The change to 60% reduction was introduced in Legion, but its cooldown was also shortened from 120 seconds to 90 seconds. Finally, in patch 7.1.5, Diffuse Magic was removed from the Brewmaster spec entirely, and to this day it remains only for Mistweaver and Windwalker specs. Since it not only negates a magic debuff, but also gives it back to its caster, as well as reducing magic damage, Diffuse Magic comes in at number 8 on this list. And at number 7 on this list, we have the Demon Hunter PvP talent ability, Reverse Magic. This is another build on this list that is both a defense and offensive ability. Added in Legion expansion alongside the Demon Hunter class, when used, this ability removes all harmful magic effects from yourself and all nearby allies within 10 yards, and sends them back to the original caster if possible. This ability is super strong in PvP, making it so any magic ability can be reversed onto the enemy player. For example, if the Demon Hunter is polymorphed or entangled, all the Demon Hunter has to do is use Reverse Magic ability, and suddenly the opposing mage is polymorphed and the opposing druid is entangled by their own roots. It took until Dragonflight in patch 10.07 for Blizz to decide this ability was a little bit too overpowered, and they made it so that when the Demon Hunter used Reverse Magic, they now are also subject to any harmful effects from dispelling it. Reverse Magic has a 1-minute cooldown, but it also works on all nearby allies that are close to the Demon Hunter as well. However, it can only clear magic debuffs and not any other type of debuff, but because it's still an AoE Dispel ability, it comes at number 7 on this list. And at number 6, we have the Mistweaver Monk talent, Restoral. This talent was added in the Dragonflight expansion, which saw the return of talent trees to the game. This ability has 3 different components and costs only 4% of the monk's mana. Restoral's restriction reads, it heals all party raid members within 40 yards and clears them of all harmful poison and disease effects. This is one of the few abilities on this list that is also a healing spell, and when not in raids, the healing is increased by 100%. This is also the first Dispel on this list to be an AoE ability that dispels 2 different types of debuffs. To make this ability even more overpowered, it is also castable while the monk is stunned. The only bad thing about Restoral is that it has a pretty long cooldown of 3 minutes, but it's still a nice trade-off considering how powerful Restoral actually is. And at number 5, we have a 4-way tie. This is simply because the following 4 abilities, Improved Cleanse, Improved Detox, Improved Nature's Cure, and finally the classic only ability Cleanse, all remove 3 different harmful effects. The debuffs these abilities dispel are not all the same, but since they all remove 3 different debuffs, we decided to lump them all together. Most of these dispels were added in the Dragonflight expansion and are only available to healing specs. We'll first take a look at the Holy Pally talent, Improved Cleanse. The basic Holy Pally ability Cleanse only removes harmful magical effects, but with the Improved Cleanse talent option, Cleanse now also removes disease and poison effects for a total of 3 effects. This is probably a callback to the original Paladin ability Cleanse that lasted from Vanilla WoW until Cataclysm. This ability is essentially the same as the new Improved Cleanse, removing the same 3 effects and having the same spell requirements. However, since Blizzard has to even out the playing field to all the healing specs, each healing spec also received an ability that removes 3 debuffs when Dragonflight launched. Because of the time difference, we're counting Improved Cleanse and the original Cleanse as 2 different abilities that can remove 3 different debuffs. The basic Mistweaver Monk ability Detox only removes magic debuffs, but with the Improved Detox talent it also removes poison and disease effects. It is therefore exactly the same as the Improved Cleanse ability the Holy Paladins have, since they remove the same 3 debuffs. Confusingly, Brewmaster and Windwalker monks also have an ability named Detox, but this ability only removes poisons and disease effects. Next up is the Restoration Druid's ability, Improved Nature's Cure. The basic Nature's Cure ability only removes magic debuffs, but the improved version also removes curses and poisons as well. So while it can remove curses, it cannot remove diseases like Improved Cleanse and Improved Detox can. It is also worth noting that the ability was first introduced in Cataclysm when a druid talent called Nature's Cure was added. This ability allowed the druid's remove corruption ability to also remove magic debuffs. However, because all the druid specs could use it, Blizz probably thought it was too overpowered and removed it with the launch of Mop. It does seem a little odd that 3 of the 6 healing specs get the ability to dispel 3 different debuffs, while the Poor Discipline, Holy Priest, and Restoration Shamans only get an ability that dispels 2 different harmful effects. And at number 4 on this list, we have the Mistweaver Monk talent, Revival. This is pretty much the Restoral ability at the number 6 spot, and it even shares an exclusive choice node with it. The only difference is that the Revival dispels not 2, but 3 debuffs. Everything else is the same, as Revival also heals all party members within 40 yards of the monk and shares a 3-minute cooldown. This is the only AoE Dispel ability of the game that can dispel magic, poison, and disease effects. Restoral can only remove poison and disease effects. The only other difference between these 2 abilities is that Restoral can be cast while stunned and Revival cannot. And at number 3, we have the Shaman ability, Cleansing Totem. The Cleansing Totem was added in the expansion Wrath of the Lich King and unfortunately only lasted for the duration of that expansion before it was removed in Cataclysm. The Cleansing Totem is a combination of 2 different totems, the Poison Cleansing Totem and the Disease Cleansing Totem. Its description is as follows. Summons a Cleansing Totem with 5 feet of the health of the caster that attempts to remove 1 disease and 1 poison effect from party members within 30 yards every 3 seconds. There are several reasons this ability is at number 3. First, it removes 2 debuffs from players. Second, it does its work autonomously from the shaman so they can focus on other things rather than dispels. Third, it has a large radius of 30 yards and can dispel anyone so as long as they're in the party with a shaman. Fourth, because the totem is doing all the work, it will save the shaman some mana since they aren't casting dispels all the time. The only downside to this ability was that it required the shaman to have a water totem to perform the spell. Because it is a massive AoE that dispels 2 debuffs and also saves the shaman a good deal of mana and can continuously operate without the shaman being there for 5 minutes, the cleansing totem comes in at number 3 on this list. And at number 2, we have the priest ability Mass Dispel. This ability has been in the game since the Burning Crusade. As such, it has a long and storied history, which we cannot fully delve into a segment in a top 10. Its current version in Dragonflight as of the time of writing the video was Dispels magic in a 15-yard radius, removing all harmful magic effects from 5 friendly targets and 1 beneficial magic effect from 5 enemy targets. Also potent enough to remove magic that is normally undispellable. There's a lot to unpack here, but first you can see that it's both a defensive and offensive dispel. Although it only removes harmful magic effects, it is so powerful that it can even dispel strong effects. Some of the defensive abilities Mass Dispel can remove are the Mage's Ice Block and the Paladin's Divine Shield, while some of the other defensive abilities it can remove are abilities like a Warlock's Banish and a Druid's Cyclone, which shows just how strong this ability really is. Mass Dispel has a 1.5 second cast time, which is rare because most dispels are instant cast, and has a base cooldown 45 seconds, and also costs a massive 8% of the priest's total mana to use. All 3 priest specs can use this ability, meaning even DPS Shadow Priest can use it. Mass Dispel is particularly useful in PvP as well as certain dungeons and raid boss fights. Once again, this is just barely scratching the surface of just how ridiculously useful this ability is, but because it is so powerful, it deserves a spot pretty high on this list, and so it lands or levitates at number 2. And finally, at number 1, we have the holy PvP talent Cleanse the Weak. This is a passive ability added in Legion, and it has not 1, but 2 overpowered parts to it. The first part of its description says, when you dispel an ally within your aura, all allies within your aura are dispelled to the same effect. A paladin's aura is 40 yards, which is pretty big, and this ability not only duplicates whatever dispel the paladin casts, but it also has no cap limit, meaning if everyone is stacked on the paladin can dispel an entire raid, with everyone having 3 different debuffs all at once. The second part of this ability is that when the paladin heals allies with the holy light, it will cleanse all disease and poisons from that target. This is essentially an auto cast of a dispel, and it doesn't even cost mana. The only downside to this ability is that while holy light does heal more than Flash of Light and costs less mana, it also has a longer cast time of 2.5 seconds. So assuming a holy paladin has this talent and the improved cleanse talent is in a raid with 40 people and an outdoor PvP zone, and everyone was within 40 yards of the paladin can theoretically dispel 120 debuffs instantly. That's a pretty big number, and the sole reason the Cleanse the Weak ability takes the cake as the biggest dispel in WoW's history. Alright, and that does it for this video. We only focus on defensive dispels and other players, so unfortunately there aren't that many abilities like the Dwarf Racial Stone form. I think we got all the dispels, but WoW is a huge game with a long history, and it's possible we might have missed some. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and suggest new video ideas if you want. You might have been expecting a bad pun at the end of this video, but we want to dispel that thought. And if you want to play the game without harmful curses, just turn on the mature language filter.